Hi, Teesha, and
Hello.
welcome to It's Time, which is a place where we can have conversations. Well, I can have conversations with really interesting people like you about how owning our time in the context of work, when we get it right, can help us really focus on doing meaningful, purposeful activities and things that ideally make our hearts sing and make a difference to others. And so I'm particularly interested in talking to people about how their COVID experience and lockdown has impacted on their ability to work smartly and efficiently, but in a broader sense, how the experience has been for them. So we can start to capture all the good bits and leave the bits that didn't work behind as we move out. And for those people who are listening to us chat, Teesha Masson is a graphic designer and she works for Strictly Savvy as their creative team lead. And Strictly Savvy is a New Zealand-based business that provides virtual assistance services to small business owners. And the reason I know a little bit about Strictly Savvy is that you, Teesha, are my virtual assistant. So so I know all about the services that your firm offers. And for anyone interested in this, I've got a very small business. I'm in no position to be employing people, certainly a range of people, and I'm able to access not only design and videography and photography services from you, Teesha, but you are a conduit into Strictly Savvy for a range of other experts that can help me whenever I require them. And it's made a real difference to my ability to get up and running. And this is a classic example, is that you've taught me how to use Zoom, and here we are chatting on Zoom. So enough of that. We'll get started. And I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and you just speak freely. And I'm particularly interested, and I think people listening will be interested in hearing about how efficiency and productivity has been, because that's a hallmark of your service that you provide to me, and certainly of Strictly Savvy. So, but there'll be other things we can canvass. So if you think about the last 5 or 6 weeks nearly, how has the experience been for you in lockdown 4? And as part of that, is there anything particular that springs to mind that has surprised you about that?
I've actually personally really enjoyed it. I worked for Strictly Savvy, as you mentioned, but I also have my own wedding photography company. So leading up to the lockdown, I had been shooting weddings pretty much every weekend, with it being summer in the middle of wedding season. So I would shoot a wedding often on the Saturday and then edit all day on Sunday. Then I would be going to Strictly Savvy work Monday to Friday, and after work I would come home and keep editing because I can't help myself. So I've actually been forced to not do any of that because I can't do my photography. I've finished editing all of my weddings. So it's actually allowed me to have that break that I really needed.
Yes.
And made me not feel guilty about taking that break, or even seeing friends on the weekends. You know, when I am really busy, I feel guilty saying no, even if I'm not doing anything, but I need that time to do nothing. So yeah, I think that's probably my answer to both questions. I'm surprised that I have enjoyed it so much.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because if you listen to other people speak, the forced slowdown has been really good for most, not all people, but most people, and you are, no exception. And I'll come back to that because we'll talk about that as we think about the things that we want to take through into the new way of working. So if you were to think about the experience you've just had and give yourself some advice if you're going into it again, what would that advice be?
Going into lockdown again?
What would you do differently?
I actually don't know if there is a lot that I would do differently. I'm pretty happy with the balance that I've been able to have through this with work and still making sure I'm getting outside every day and going for walks and things like that. Spending more time with my partner. I think one thing is I would just like to have a little bit more time to make sure all of my computer setup was working properly. My computer from the office, transporting that caused a few issues, but other than that, it's been pretty smooth.
So if we think about the things that you do to be efficient and productive in normal circumstances, and people are listening to this, would be the top 3 things that you would advise to help people think about how to use their time as wisely and productively as possible?
I'd say the number one thing that we at Strictly Savvy use as one of our major tools is a time tracking tool called Harvest, which it has every single one of our clients in there and every project that we're working on. And basically we're timing every minute of our day, tracking them to the appropriate timers. We of course have internal admin timers as well for breaks and things like that. But it's a really good way to be able to visually see if you're wasting time and like if you've got too much time on admin, you know that you need to be spending your time more wisely. And obviously when we're tracking time on the client timers, we can't be messing around. So we're 100% efficient, I would like to say, on the client timers. So that would be a huge one for me. It is probably a bit strange for people to adjust to having their day tracked, and a lot of people probably don't like it, but I quite enjoy it personally. Another one is a program that we use called Teamwork, which we put all of our projects into, and it's like a project management tool. So you can set due dates and start dates and organize all of the tasks that you need to do in this program. And then for me, I can either assign them to myself or assign them to my team, set all of the due dates, and then they just pop up in our task list for that day so we know what we need to be working on. So they're definitely my top 2. They're probably the main tools I use as well. The other one is that I just personally write myself a to-do list on a notebook because I have random ad hoc tasks pop up as well. So I like to visually cross them off so that I can see I'm getting stuff done.
Right. So it's not surprising then to be organised, you've got to have some kind of system going.
Yes.
And technology these days does provide the opportunity to enhance that, doesn't it? I'm a bit like you. I do a list. I don't from my desk calendar planning. I generally use a list. I'm also, my experience of you being that organised and productive, the 2 things come to mind for me in case anyone's listening thinking, good God, I couldn't be that would just be too restrictive, is that you actually get trained as a client to use your own time well. So you and I spend most of our time communicating via email quite quickly, don't we? And currently and periodically we catch up. And I learned early on, because you really suggested that in a very courteous way, that there was no requirement for us to meet face to face really, unless the email wasn't working. So I got trained, hopefully, to be a reasonably productive client and not one that.
Well, it's about what works best for everyone as well, but also making sure that you're not taking too much time out of your day when we can quick fire back and forwards.
Yes. So, and there are a number of professions, aren't there, that work like that, particularly client-facing service organisations where you're billing on time. How do you manage downtime? Like, how does that get factored in? How does the organisation, without letting trade secrets go, of course, help people who must bill time get work-life balance?
As in when we don't have client work? at Strictly Savvy.
Or even when you do, so, you know, because are you full on for the whole 8 hours, or are you able to have downtime in that time? How does that all work?
Quite often I am very full on for the full 8 hours.
Yes.
And it's a lot of, I guess, personally forcing yourself to have those breaks. Our bosses are amazing, and they definitely encourage us to take our proper breaks when we should. So we are definitely encouraged to do that, and we are allowed a certain amount of admin time
Yes.
through the day to have those breaks, obviously, as well. So there's definitely that time allocated. We've got internal team meetings that we do most days as well, especially through this lockdown. We've been doing daily Zoom calls, and then a lot of the other downtime will then get spent focusing on us and our marketing side of things, really.
Yeah. So if you think about the ways that you worked before lockdown, and the way that you work bringing those into lockdown, is there anything in the way that you worked that you think you might leave behind on the way out that didn't really work or no longer seems fit for purpose?
I think just the slowing down a little bit more. I think this has been a really big realization for a lot of people, that not everything is urgent or life or death. So I would quite often feel like I haven't got through my entire to-do list at the end of the day, so I would just stay late and keep working until I felt on top of things. And I was very conscious of that coming into lockdown. Working from home, I could sort of just keep working into the night if I really wanted to, and no one would know. But I've made that conscious decision to, when I've done my hours, unless I'm almost finished, I just stop and continue the next day. So I think going back to normal, I need to keep doing that and be very conscious of letting myself have my breaks and not feel bad if I'm not 100% there.
Well, what's been the biggest benefit of having those breaks for you? You probably talked a little bit about it before.
I think just my sanity a little bit. I tend to think about things a lot in the evening that I haven't done, which I'm really surprised that leaving myself some stuff to do in the morning, I'm not overly stressing about it, just sort of realizing that I'm only human and I can only do what I can do. Most people are really good as long as you're communicating with them and are realistic about deadlines and timeframes. So I think more just trusting myself a little bit more and not putting so much pressure on me. It's not really the other people doing it, it's me.
It's interesting. I've spoken to, over time, a number of business owners, and the theme that comes out understandably is that we want to be there immediately for our clients. You know, we must help them, and so that can have organisations working in that urgent and important space a lot, and people in that space, whereas what you are saying, and I've often asked people to consider, is just set reasonable time frames. So don't set yourself a requirement that you have to respond immediately or in the same day, that your service model allows for people to think about what they're doing before they reply, and that you don't have to kind of work all hours and into the night to be able to provide services. It'll be really interesting to see if that comes across right into the daytimes. Is there anything that you've done? So you've talked about what you've done differently just now, really, which is being comfortable with incomplete work. That would be a biggie for you. Yep. And not stressing about that. So I heard less stress about trying new ways of working, being comfortable, not finishing everything at night and working long hours to do it, and setting realistic expectations for yourself and your clients. And there are easy ways that you can do that. And doing exercise and spending time with your partner. So is there anything else that you've done differently or tried apart from that that you will bring through?
Yeah, I think that is pretty much everything. Thankfully, a lot of what we do at Savvy has been able to come home with me. All of the programs and tools we're using, I'm still able to use. The daily team meetings that we have, they're quite good. So that might be something that we implement when we're back to normal, as we weren't doing that. And it's quite nice to see who needs support and what they need help with every day. But they're probably the main things.
And when you're working with clients, you feel free to use me as your example. What are you seeing in your clients in terms of how they're managing time and demands and the different environment that we're all living within? How are they being?
With the lockdown?
How are they experiencing it all?
A lot of my clients, I think, have actually had a chance to work on their businesses rather than in their businesses. So it's seen an increase in my team in particular with the creative side of things and marketing and that sort of stuff. A lot of them have just had a chance to reassess what they want to do and given us some stuff to work away on in the background. But then we have had that urgent stuff as well, like getting COVID-19 notifications up on websites and graphics for social media and things like that. But generally, most things have been pretty calm and not urgent, which is nice. But a little bit of both.
Cool. And if you think about all those things that you've really enjoyed that have started to become almost part of the normal way that you work, about bringing that through as we move from 3 to 2 to 1, hopefully quite quickly, but who knows, and out into our new normal. What do you think the obstacles might be of getting in the way with you letting things go at the end of the day without having to have them finished and having time at the weekends for things apart from your wedding work and having a balance that you talked about? What might get in the way of you retaining that?
I think for me, my partner was here the whole time during level 4. So he was very conscious of making sure that I was taking my breaks and finishing when I needed to and drinking water and just all of that sort of stuff. So with level 3, he's now back at work and I've already noticed that I've missed a couple of lunch breaks and things like that. So I think him holding me accountable for doing those things may start to slip a little bit. That would probably be the biggest one. So I just have to be conscious.
Holding ourselves to account, it's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because I've been thinking about the same thing. All of the things I thought I would leave behind or bring forward, it's all very well when you're in the thick of it, but what's going to get in the way of me, for example, not using a bus anymore and buying an e-bike? So it will be interesting to see how our world continues to either slow down or work at a reasonable pace, or whether it starts to ramp up again the way it was before. What, if you think about the context of work and the idea that we can, if we created it, have our work-life balance that works for us and has us less on that treadmill and more enjoying the moment and enjoying the work that we're doing and not working in urgent important and not being pressured the way we have been possibly in the past. What question, if we were reversing this interview, what question would you ask me, or what question have I not asked you that you think I should be asking people about this?
I guess, what would you think is one of the major things that could help efficiency, like implementing the 4-day working week? Are there things like that you think even through this lockdown time would have been really good, or do you think that would have impacted the way that we work?
No, really good question. I think the fundamental thing about being organised and efficient, whether you work a 4-day or a 5-day or 3-day week, is actually wanting to be organised and efficient and productive, and committing to finding ways where you can learn where you're not, and to experience when you're not and what that feels like, and to get yourself into a position where the current way of working. So for me, if I get that feeling of getting on the treadmill and just running faster and faster and faster, I now know how to get off. So it's like any change, you have to get yourself into a position where you seriously wish to change. And then you put systems in place to make that change, and either hold yourself accountable. But I really like what you're saying, find somebody around, or people around you who think like you, to help you hold yourself accountable. I mean, I do like the concept of a 4-day week. For those people who haven't heard me rave on about this, and if you're interested, Andrew Barnes has written a really interesting book. We'll put a link down at the bottom at the end of this about the 4-day week, and it doesn't mean it means 32 hours work in a flexible way. Could be at home, could be at work, could be flexible hours. 100% output that you'd normally do on a 5-day week, and 100% of the salary and terms and conditions that you have. And I think the main trick to getting that right is wanting to work like that, but also helping organisations work out how to get outcomes right, so that you're not monitoring outputs like how many hours you sit at your desk, but what did we all agree that we would do in the next week, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 1 year, and how are we tracking towards that? And so long as the workload is reasonable, being able to work 4 days a week fastens people's minds on the things that are getting in the way.
Yeah.
Like meetings, just the big thing. Mostly people reduce those, and all of a sudden they've got a day a week, didn't know they had, and other things. So, yeah.
There's also, I think there was, at least before this, quite a big stigma about people working from home, because obviously that's a huge amount of trust the employer is giving the employee, because they're not there, they're not seeing what they're doing all day. So I wonder if that will change after this.
It's interesting. I think yes, because people have had to be trusted in most organisations, because there's been so much in that urgent and important space that people have been freed up to get home and just do what they need to get done. And I'd be surprised if there's many organisations out there with people in this environment who haven't done their absolute best to get what needs to be done, and either in the urgent space or the thinking and the planning for it. But you're quite right, that thing about trust, and again, just referring to the 4-day week book and Andrew Barnes' experience, is and I've been a senior leader and I've been a chief executive, so it's no criticism of that role, but most organisations found that the biggest obstacle to introducing a different way of working was at that level. And I know, because I've been in those roles, but I think senior leaders had now had an experience of working at home, and have the people I've spoken to have all shared different observations about how they've got to know their teams better, and how they work, and their quirks, and where their strengths are, and they can be trusted to get on and do stuff. So and lots of people are talking about fundamentally changing the way we work, and I do see this as a fabulous opportunity for individuals to lobby for a way of working for themselves that works, so long as it fits in, reasonably with the organisation. And I guess the other thing I'm interested in seeing is what changes to workplace policy is done to free up people to be able to make decisions like that. So, one of my favourite ideas is whether people might start having like a time culture. So when you work for Strictly Savvy, or when you work for any organisation, this is how we think about time. and you take care of other people's times, and you don't have back-to-back meetings, and I think meetings are another fascinating way of wasting time. But so I'm interested in seeing whether people do get quite creative about how they create workplaces that allow people to thrive and not burn out.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about in terms of how we manage our own rhythm at work and probably in our private life, what is it that we do that gets in our own way with that? And you were just talking offline, and we've now come online to chat about this, about our own expectations being reasonable or unreasonable. So talk to me a wee bit about how that is for you.
Yeah, so that's one of my hugest things that I get stuck on. So I've had multiple conversations with my bosses about it. So really, I'm able to be really open with them, thankfully. And I've often said to them, I'm just too overwhelmed, and I feel like I can't go home when I haven't finished my to-do list and all of that sort of stuff I was talking about before. And they usually turn around and say, you're actually doing more than enough, and it's you that's thinking that you need to be doing more when you don't actually need to, and we fully back you. So we're happy if you slow down and you set realistic deadlines and things like that. It's often me holding myself to this level of perfection that I can't reach. And then the other side of it for me is having someone to hold me accountable to take my breaks and go and have a cup of water and things like that.
And that whole feeling that we have to get it right and perfect, and then we're not enough, and we're all human, so we all have the same version of all of that. And what you're saying, I think that I'm hearing, is that we have to acknowledge that when it happens, and have systems and processes and ways of thinking in place to stop and curb that.
I was just going to say it's more just a lot of the time, I think, being in your own head about it.
Yes. So what might you do? So now that your lovely partner's gone to work and you've acknowledged that that's what happens sometimes to you, what changes might you make? It will never go away, will it? But we can kind of mitigate that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I need to just be staying really mindful about my own well-being, and the fact that I'm not going to be as efficient if I don't stop and have something to eat anyway, because I'm going to start getting a headache or whatever it is. It's going to help me focus in the long run. So, just being mindful of actually stopping, and then, just sort of not needing to be perfect all the time.
Yeah. There's so much neuroscience starting to emerge now about how our brains work, and sometimes they can be very helpful, our brains, but sometimes they can be entirely unhelpful, driving us, to places where we didn't even know we wanted to go until we get there and think, how the heck did I end up here, or why am I thinking the way that I'm thinking? And stress and change and all of that kind of stuff makes it worse. But I think increasingly it'll be interesting to see how much of us start to dip into that neuroscience more and realise that we're all the same, just the way that we exhibit it are different, and there are things that we can do differently. And this is note to self more than anything else, and just be kind and reasonable, and understanding that actually we are not superhuman and never will be. So,
and most people understand that, and you talk to anyone and they feel the same.
And I always just think apology goes a long way as well. So you and I can hold each other to account, and I can say, how many hours are you working this week? How many weddings have you got? Do you think that might be one too many to squeeze into a week? What steps have you taken? And you can do the same to me. What's going on in your head, Julie, that has you email me the same question 4 times in a day? Might you need to go and have a glass of water or something to eat? So there we are. Do that. As you know, I'm only just starting to do this, and everybody I speak to comes at it from a different perspective. So there are themes, and then you're always listening and think, my gosh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yes.
So across it all, and you'll get an opportunity to have a look at all of those as we pull those themes together, I think we'll have a nice range of things that will interest hopefully a broad range of people who are listening to this. Not everybody will pick up everything, but I think it's been a great exercise, and I've certainly appreciated people finding time to talk to me. So thank you very much. Say hi to the team from me.
I will.
And we're going to finish off here. And then you and I are going to have a meeting anyway, which I didn't tell you about because there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. So we'll do that next. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you. Talk soon.